Drugs that have been developed to help treat diabetes are now being pushed by drug companies and doctors as a great way for patients to lose weight. But what patients aren't being told is that the threat is so serious of permanent injury, even the possibility of death. New reports keep coming in from individuals who've been harmed by this class of treatment. I have attorney Cameron Stephenson with me to talk about it. Cameron, every now and then we see a drug company come into the market. They absolutely know that the drug that they're selling off-label is a drug that has propensity not just to harm people, but to kill people. Fen-Phen, we saw it with Fen-Phen. It was incredible. Everybody was taking Fen-Phen and people were dying of heart disease, a slow, ugly death. Hundreds and hundreds of women. This is looking very similar to me.
Pat, we have a problem here, and I got to tell you, this is something that I predict within the next 12 to 24 months is going to get even worse. So let me tell you what you've got. You've got this poster child pharma industry company, Novo Nordisk, okay? They have developed these 3 drugs, Ozempic, Wegovy, and Rybelsus. They developed these drugs allegedly for a very specific patient population, okay? It was supposed to be approved only for diabetics and only for people with severe obesity. The issue is that that's just what they told the FDA. All right, make no mistake, Novo Nordisk knew when they developed these drugs that they were gonna go after a much larger population. The idea was to be first, to get it approved with the FDA and to get it out on the market. And immediately they start promoting off-label, start marketing off-label for people that are outside of this very narrow patient population.
Okay, so let me talk about off-label just a second. We always see when a drug is out there and the drug company says, well, you know, we only have a limited number of people we can sell this to. What if we expand it? What if we make it bigger? Here's what they do. They say to the detailer is the person who goes around and talks to the doctor. Most of the time they show up with cupcakes and a cake, or they take them to lunch and they say, Doc, you know what? We have these drugs that are for diabetics. They can save the life of a diabetic. But you know, you could also use it for people who want to lose weight. What person in this world doesn't want to say that aren't going to bite on that, right?
So you've got these people that think that they need to lose 15 or 20 or 25 pounds. They see these celebrities over in Hollywood that are getting on these magic pills. They think they're going to be able to get on for 30 days, lose weight, and get off of it, and everything's going to be fine. That is not what's happening, Pap. These people were not warned about what these drugs can cause. They were never intended for your average run-of-the-mill person that needs to lose 10 or 15 pounds. And what happens is they're getting on these drugs. They get off these drugs and they have what's known as gastroparesis. Okay, this is paralyzing your stomach. Now let's think about this. You eat a meal, the meal goes into your stomach, and rather than it pass naturally through the gastrointestinal tract, this paralyzes your stomach. So food is rotting in your stomach. All right, it's going to come out one of 2 ways. You're gonna vomit 5 or 10 times a day to where it gets so bad the gastric acid in your stomach is dissolving your teeth to where they fall out, okay? That's number 1. Number 2, you have what's known as a gastric obstruction, and you actually have to go to the emergency room and have your stomach pumped. And Pat, I read an intake yesterday where a young lady about 26 years old was trying to lose about 18 pounds. Okay, she has a gastric obstruction. She goes into the hospital. She has to have her stomach pumped, but that's not the end of it. She has permanent stomach paralysis, and she may now, if this lasts for the rest of her lifetime, need an NG tube or fluid feeding to get nutrition that you and I take for granted on a daily basis.
Okay, first of all, 2 things, Cameron. The viewers have to know this. First of all, your experience as a trial lawyer is extraordinary. You're one of the best trial lawyers we have in-house. Second of all, the cases you've worked are massive. You've worked the J&J talc case, you've worked PPI, you've worked a whole string of some of the most important pharmaceutical cases in the country. Now, I want to ask you this question. When you look at this case compared to the stuff that you've worked, how do you rate it? As far as seriousness,
it is as good as any of them.
It's serious as
the injuries. Like I said, the story that I just told you is serious. This case has the potential to be one of the biggest cases that I've ever worked on. I think that this case has the potential to be one of the biggest cases that our firm has worked on. We're going to have to see, how this plays out, because these people are just now getting injured. We have no idea what's going to happen in the next 20 in the next 1 to 2 years. But if I could leave you with one other thing, Pat.
Well, you can leave me. We're going to talk about it. The viewers need to know. Before we get to that, let me ask a couple of questions. What the company did is they tried to mimic what they call the GLP enzyme. It's an enzyme that helps your stomach slow down so you can get nutrition as you're eating. In other words, if you eat, you want to slow it down a little bit because you have to absorb the nutrition.
Correct.
So they mimic that. It's a hormone. They mimic that and they slowed it down way too much. The test that I've seen, and I'm sure you've seen the same test, is when they ran a comparison. This is a person that's taking these drugs. This is a person who isn't. The regular movement through the bowels was 4 minutes, natural, compared to 70 minutes.
Yeah.
And so what you're saying is that if it doesn't move through the bowels, it simply just clogs your system up.
Correct.
We're even seeing cases, aren't we, where women are saying, I feel full all the time. And when they do an endoscopy, they say, yeah, because you have food all the way up almost to your mouth.
Exactly.
That's been stored.
And so the bigger issue there, Pap, is not only does it delay it, but they did not test it enough and do the adequate clinical trials to get a full statistically significant sample size. So when you say it delays it 70 minutes, what a very significant patient population is seeing is that it takes hours, it takes days. Some people have permanent stomach paralysis. And if I can go back to just one thing, whenever I was following this company announced first quarter earnings about 6 weeks ago, their stock was up 15% in one day.
Wow.
That is one training session, and if you compare that in context to the average annualized return of the S&P 500, the 500 best companies that we have, is 8% a year. They did 15% in one day. And whenever, even their own executives were on CNBC, Pap, they were talking about how they shattered Wall Street's expectations about earnings per share because this class of drugs, these 3 drugs, they were writing prescriptions like they didn't even anticipate. And guess what that means? When you compare the amount of prescriptions that they are writing, not that they are writing, but the amount of prescriptions that are being sold by this company's products, the patient population that the FDA approved these drugs for, the amount of prescriptions that are being sold are multiples of what the patient population is. So off-label promotion and marketing is occurring.
It's all off-label, and the detailers, they get paid bonuses according to how many drugs they sell. So they show up at the doctor. I'm not kidding. These little cutesy, perky types show up with cupcakes. Yeah. Doc, happy birthday. Oh, by the way, you can use this as a diet drug. What doctor, first of all, there's a couple problems here. Any doctor in America right now should be on notice. Stop
100%.
Doing that, doc.
100%.
Do not tell your patients this is safe. And if people watching this are going to a doctor and their doctor said, oh yeah, don't worry about it, that's just a bunch of nonsense. Look, let me tell you something. I've watched your career. I watched you handle one of the Johnson & Johnson talc case. And one thing that I've heard you talking about is that these companies, they look at how much money are we going to make? Are we going to make $10 billion a year on this drug, right? Yes. Now, the company makes $10 billion and they say, at the end of the day, after we hurt all these people, we only have to pay $3 billion. So we have a net of $7 billion every year that we've made. And so that's how these companies think. It's a ghoulish analysis. And unfortunately, when you dig into this, I know you're going to be one of the people trying these cases. When you dig into it, are you going to find that the clinicals were gamed? That the clinicals were hustled to make it look like this is not a problem. That's my prediction. Time
and time again in these cases, your prediction is going to end up being correct. They are designed to limit the ability to detect certain things, plain and simple. And when you're talking about profits over people, Mike, you've been doing this for decades, right? I've been doing it for 15 years. This is not the first chapter of Big Pharma profits over people. It sure as hell isn't going to be the last chapter. This is the next chapter. Serious injury. People can die. People's lives can be changed. We don't even know where this gut paralysis goes at this point. We have no epidemiology to understand how serious it is. Yeah. These women that are saying, well, this is going to go away, maybe not, probably not. And if they're not calling somebody right now, and if they're not telling their doctor, you know what, doc, you really dropped the ball on me. Any doctor, I'm telling you, any doctor at this point, I agree.
that is saying, yes, use this for weight loss, they are a malpractice target when it goes bad with a client.
100%. I think just like the American public, you know, the sheet was pulled over their eyes, but at this point in time, you can't just pretend this isn't happening.
Well, I'm glad you're working on it. I really
sir.
honestly feel like you're one of the best trial lawyers in the business. You've got great experience. Bring this one home, okay?
I will do, Pap. I appreciate you having me.